one of the elements of emotional intelligence is a key to self-knowledge, understanding yourself, knowing yourself. So this is why I'm going to chat today with Kathy Mann, the author of our fabulous Avoiding Burnout book, which I have read personally a couple of times and made a lot of notes in it. And today I'm going to ask Kathy to sign it for me, finally, after a year of having it. But I do have a couple of questions to understand how Kathy went through the whole process, and how did it help her to go forward, and how can it help you, people that are in corporate or running business, in going forward without getting to what Kathy got into.
Yeah.
On one side a curse, on the other side I would say a blessing.
Yes.
So Kathy, tell me just in a couple sentences, what is the book all about?
Well, the book is really about my story. So I got very sick from stress, and that meant two things. I developed an autoimmune disease, so my immune system started attacking my own tissue, and that one is a lifelong thing that I will have to manage forever, and that was triggered by stress. And then on the other side, I experienced 3 years of chronic fatigue, and that had a dramatic impact on my life. So the book is really about my story of how I got to that point of such severe illness from stress, and secondly, it's about how not to do that.
When I read the book, I have to say the first part of it, and I remember I said that before, it felt like I was reading a science fiction.
Yeah.
because of the way you described the things in the book, and that was on one side some of the things I could relate to, on the other side some of the things were like, how is this even possible? So, but what I wanted to relate to in particular was that second part of your book, which is where you talk about the 7 principles of self-preservation, which was a very I would say a lesson for me as well, being in the industry when it comes to especially talking about understanding yourself and how can that help you in your life. And now I'm trying to find where was the mark that I have done, because I wanted to start with the very specific things. So the part 2, the 7 principles that Kathy describes in the book, that have supported you, right, in your journey forward. The first element, which was the closest to me, was know yourself. And you start this chapter with like an opening. As part of understanding how I became sick, knowing myself was the starting point. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, so I was quite confused when I became sick. I didn't realize, I thought that a lot of people around me were sick and were stressed, and yet they weren't becoming as sick as I became. So I started to wonder, well, what is it about me and my life? Why am I becoming so ill from what happened? So I unpacked my life, and I split it up into all these components, and I looked at work, and I looked at my personal life, my relationships, my leisure, and I tried to figure out what had gone so horribly wrong. And I think in part of that, I started to realize then, understanding the kind of person I am should match the kind of work that I do. So that was a real trigger as part of my illness, because I do believe the fundamental cause of me burning out was doing the wrong work. It wasn't aligned with who I am as a person.
When when you think of that experience that you had, if you were to go back, how many years would that be? 5, 6 years?
So, yeah.
And at that time, if you knew yourself better, if that self-knowledge, self-awareness was on, let's say, the level that you have it now, would it support you somehow in not getting into burnout, or maybe detecting it much faster than you did?
Yes, I think I used to live very much in my head. I didn't really feel things deeply and sort of step back. So I think I was all analytical and obsessed with what I had to do, and I didn't stop to realize that I wasn't really enjoying my work. So the wisdom that I've gained along the way is probably, when things aren't working, to step back and to realize, well, actually I'm not happy, I'm not enjoying this work is not really aligned to the person I am, and I don't want to be doing this work anymore. And I thought in the past, I think I spent most of my life feeling obligated. I felt this big obligation to meet the needs of all these other people. You know, at the time, as a business owner, I was meeting the needs of my shareholders and my father and my husband, and trying to meet the needs of my young children, and really my own needs were not really in the picture. So part of that wisdom is understanding, okay, what do I need to really be thriving and delivering at my absolute best? So I think that's probably the biggest nugget of wisdom that I've picked up along this difficult journey.
This is why when I speak with people about emotional intelligence and how does that influence their life, who they are, and going forward in life, I always say that knowing yourself, it's the foundation. If you don't have that covered, you can't go any further than that, and that really helps you going forward with.
Yeah, it really does. So I think I could have prevented the burnout if I got to a certain point and realized, oh, I'm actually really not doing well here. I'm not performing at my best, and I'm not happy. So if I could have made a few changes, I would have stopped the health decline in its tracks. You know, there were benefits. I do feel that I have really benefited from this experience of burnout because my life is transformed. But nonetheless, I'm sure not everybody in the world has to suffer to that degree. So that's part of my quest. I really want to help people not get to that really intense point of suffering, to sort of step back from their lives and realize I'm not really on the right track. There's something not right here.
Okay, so that's why it was on one side it was a curse, on the other side
a blessing. Yeah.
blessing.
Yeah.
You can help other people now, not to.
Yes, that's I believe part of my calling now, to help the world not go down that same path to the same degree.
Okay, so this is one of the things that I also stress out, and Kathy, you are actually the first person that I met that got so sick from burnout, and people don't understand. People think that it's just okay. I will get into the depression, I will go to a psychologist, psychiatrist, or whoever, and then I'll get back and I'll go on with my life if it happens. But they never know how close that can be.
Yeah, and I think it's I always believed in mind over matter. You know, I was an ultramarathon runner, and when you start to really feel the pain towards the end of the race, you can overcome a lot with your mental strength. You can really push yourself forward and to keep going. And I always thought that, well, whatever the case in my life, I can triumph with enough kind of mental strength and motivation. But I didn't realize I would get to that point where my entire health collapsed. I couldn't actually function. And, you know, what I've read there's varying degrees of burnout. So if it's fairly mild, it's about a 6 to 9 month recovery. And then the worst that most people experience is about 2 years. And that's quite a long time, if you think about it, to be unable to work and earn income, and unable to, if you're a parent, you won't be able to go to your kids' children's parties and play with them and give them all the things that they need. So it affects your life pretty systemically. You know, it'll feed into every aspect. Your relationships will be impacted, your income, your fun and your love for life, and your children. So really it is important not to get that far down the journey, and to pull back in time.
So the first element, as we said, was the self-knowledge. How does this relate to the other 6 principles? It was like a starting point, but that's a journey. It's not just one thing and okay, I built my self-awareness and there I am, I reached my destination.
Yes, I think, and the thing is about principle 1 is it is the first principle for a reason. It was the most important principle, and I had to start there, because you start with anything else and you're going to go off track again. So it's really fundamental that you start your journey with self-knowledge. And then the other principles are around, looking after yourself and things. So, for example, principle number 2 is about creativity. And I think we all have a creative side to ourselves. And I didn't really allow that side to flourish. You know, I seem to have this thing in my mind that, that's nice to have, and I'm not going to allow myself to dabble with the fun. I have this obligation, I've got to work, and I've got to be serious, and I've got to be a responsible grown-up. I can't play and paint and draw. And I should have allowed myself that, because I am a creative person. I should have embraced that side of myself. So that's the principle 2, and there are many others. I think principle 5 is also very important. So that one is about alignment. And so when we live a life of really strong alignment between our thoughts, our words, our deeds, our moral compass, and who we are as a person, then we start to live a really good life. And it's a very difficult thing to do. You know, sometimes we have these thoughts and, you know, we say things that we don't quite mean, and we get out of alignment very easily. But if we can kind of try to streamline as much as possible all those things, then life almost becomes effortless, and we start to really live in more joy and at that authenticity that you mentioned in the opening. So that's living an authentic life, thinking positive things about yourself, saying what you mean, doing things that are aligned, committing to what you promise people, and feeling that integrity that this is the right thing for me to be doing. So when all of those line up, then you really start to enjoy your life a lot. Yeah.
So that alignment element would be, just correct me please if I'm wrong, a part of that getting to know yourself, that self-knowledge, because when you do know yourself, when you create it, build that self-awareness, this is where you basically also can make a choice, whether do you want to align with who you are, or do you choose to go still against the current? And
yes, and I think it's almost like your compass, your internal compass. So, and what that does for you, once you know yourself well enough, you have this great self-knowledge. Some opportunity comes along, for example, and then what you can do is you can evaluate it against your compass. Does it seem right? Yeah. I'm an introvert. I get an opportunity to do sales. That's not going to work. You know, that just doesn't feel right for me. It's not me at my absolute best. So then I realize, okay, I don't want to do that. Yeah. But something comes up and someone says, oh, do you want to write about personal growth for my blog column? Do you want to be a guest writer? Well, that's up my alley. That is really where I feel like I get to write, because that is where I find my joy, and I get to contribute on a topic that I really am passionate about. Yeah. So then that's in alignment with everything. So it really helps you to steer your life towards the kinds of opportunities and work that you want to embrace, and away from the things that don't really work for you.
Yeah, so it's still, going back to principle number one.
Yes, you always, that is your compass. It always brings you back there.
Knowing yourself, and then taking the next steps in order to expand on that self-knowledge.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, I know the birds have been chirping around that you are writing a next book.
Yes.
Can you tell us something about it?
Yes, I'm very excited about my next book. So my next book is called Mastering Stress. And the first book was very much about my own journey of illness and how not to do that. Yeah. And then what I found very interesting is I started interviewing and researching about how other people feel, encounter stress. Because the thing about burnout as well is that burnout is very different and unique. It's as unique as we are. Each person experiences in a different way. And so people manage stress differently as well. And the philosophy of the book is that we can learn from each other. I've learned remarkable things. For example, this one lady I interviewed before work, she's got a corporate job, and before work every day she wakes up before the family, and she does something like going on a treadmill or an exercise bike, and she watches a TED talk at the same time. Fantastic. So in that 30 minutes, she's feeding her brain, her mind, she's learning something new, and she's getting exercise in, and then she's into work early, and she comes home early so that she can be with her family. So that's her routine, and she uses time very wisely to be able to reduce her stress and get exercise in and learn at the same time.
Time management.
Yeah, so I'm learning all of these fascinating things, and I weave that into the book along with the good solid advice about stress management and how we perceive stress. So I've learned so much since I wrote the first book, and I'm weaving all of that into this second one, and that should be available in November. So the release date is November this year, 2019. So that's very exciting. Yep, I'm about halfway through, and I get a lot of feedback from my readers along the way, which I'm really enjoying. So it's a collaborative effort. You know, people have the opportunity to pitch in and give me ideas as I'm going, which is really fun. Yeah.
So I'll have you back before the end of the year.
Yeah, absolutely.
For a second interview, but then we're going to be relating more to stress and how can we implement that in our life. And well, not stress, but not having stress, or how to manage stress in our life. So, considering all your experience, you have experience in corporate, you have experience in running your own or being a part of running a business.
Yes.
And then now after leaving that part and getting better, a bit of an entrepreneur because you, well, you had to get that book out somehow, right?
Yeah.
So when you think of a business environment, what kind of a point of wisdom or advice would you give to not only ladies but people in general when they are in a working environment or trying to sort of juggle their private life and their working environment or their professional life? From your experience, what kind of advice would you give them to sort of not get where you were?
I think the most critical piece of advice would be not to do work that is against your strengths. So do work that allows you to let your strengths and talents flourish. And when you start to do that, you perform better and you're happier, and that happiness infuses to the rest of your life and it rubs off on your family members, and that sort of spreads. It's quite contagious. So I think the key thing is you can't hate your work. It's not really a sustainable thing. If you hate your job so much, it is going to reach a point where you have to make some sort of change. So that's pretty critical. And then I think to business owners, a big mistake that I made was to try to do all the components of the job and not outsource pieces. So now that I know myself well, if I was in that position again, what I would do is I would outsource, for example, the accounting, because that's not my strength. I don't love it. It drags me down. It makes me feel exhausted. So any chunk of work that you feel is, oh, I don't want to do that, try to outsource that to another person or partner with people where you're weak. Even in a corporate environment, if you know these parts of your job you're really good at, can you partner with someone or get help or get a peer to sort of review your work there, to just support you a little bit in the places where you're weak. Because then you start to live in a place where you're much more focused on what you're good at instead of trying to fix your weaknesses. Rather partner with other people and let them support you so that you can shine.
So would I be right saying shortly, understand yourself, understand your strengths and weaknesses, and go against all the teachings that you had in your life when people told you focus on fixing your weaknesses?
Don't fix your weaknesses. It's
focus on strengthening your strengths and working according to them, and outsource what you absolutely hate and bad at.
And then you'll find your energy levels rise when you spend much more time doing things that you love. You've got some sort of buoyant feeling of energy. You feel, and you feel it in your own body when you do things that you hate. If I think about doing the accounting, I just get this slump, and I feel like that. I actually feel it in my body.
I resonate with that one.
Yes. So, but when I think about writing, I feel, I want to write. I can't wait. I wake up in the morning and that's what I want to do. So do the things that feed you and outsource the things that don't.
Fantastic. I'm really looking forward to the next book.
Me too.
I'll definitely be one of the first ones to get it then signed already, not wait for a year. So if I can ask you for a pen, then I'll have my book signed.
With pleasure.
Thank you so much for today,
Thanks for
Kathy,
having me.
and well, all I can wish you is probably the mood to write more.
Yes.
Going forward, having that, how do you call that zone time when you are just like in the flow, or in the flow, that's what I was looking for.